Welcome back to A Story to Tell on the campus of Dixie State University. This is Lane Rano, and today I'm talking with Larry Meyers. Larry, how are you?
Hello, Lane. Good. I'm doing well.
What's going on in your life?
Well, I'm running for United States Senate, so here I am to talk about my life, I guess.
Has your family approved this?
I'm not sure my wife even knows. Maybe I should have warned her, huh?
Well, I talked to one candidate in the past sometime, and I said, "What did your wife know about this?" And he said, "Well, I just talked her into it yesterday."
No, my wife's very supportive of running for Senate. She's very actively involved in the campaign. We travel together. She is my technical assistant. She's really good at a lot of computer stuff. So we make a good team. I appreciate her support on the campaign.
How did you meet her?
We met as students at BYU. We were both, I was studying political science and she was studying international relations and history. And so we met through a club called the College Americans Club. It was a conservative constitutional study group. And we were having a big event, having some speakers come. And I was recruiting to get people to come to our meetings. And this beautiful young lady walked up to me and caught my attention. We started talking, and the rest was history.
How long did it take you to marry her?
A few months.
A few months.
Her father thought it should have taken longer. But my wife said, no, the time is right. So I've been listening to her ever since.
Well, there's something on the internet the other day. It said, if it's not working out the way you're doing it, do it the way your wife told you to do it.
It's good advice. A wise man will learn to follow that type of advice.
Well, I think I found out you were running by an email that she sent out. And I answered it back and asked if you might be available, and she referred me. So apparently she's in charge.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on the show. And we're just starting to get the word out about the campaign. We're traveling around to different parts of the state, meeting with people. Of course, using social media, Facebook and Twitter, and of course, good old email to spread the word. So we're just in the initial stages of the campaign here.
What response are you getting from people?
Very good so far. I've met with people in a lot of different parts of the state, including northern Utah. We've been up to Weber County, Utah County, Salt Lake County. And a lot of people are saying they'd like to have someone who's not a career politician, not the same old establishment type of politicians back in the Senate. So they're excited to see someone like me who's never held a major public office, hasn't been back in Washington, D.C. for forever. They're looking for something new, I think. So I think there'll be a good response.
I remember a long time ago there was a guy running for the Senate. I think his name was Orrin something. And one of the things he said about the prior guy that was in there, I've forgotten who that was. Who would that have been before him?
Yeah, I don't remember the senator's name.
Anyway, it was something about, what do you say to someone who's been in the Senate in Washington for what do you call him? You call him home.
Right, yeah. That's a classic story, and it should have applied to the next the next guy that got elected there.
The guy that got in at that time.
Senator Hatch. Yeah, I've made a pledge to only serve 2 terms if I was elected. I've put that in writing. And so if I were to be elected, I feel like I go back there, I try to be a public servant, do the best that I can, and then move on with life.
What have you done with your life since college?
A lot of things. I've been a husband and a father. That's the thing that I'm probably most happy about and pleased with. Marley and I have been married for 28 years now, and we have 3 sons. 2 of them are in college. One's at BYU, and one is at Utah State. And our youngest is on an LDS church mission in Colorado. So we're pleased that we've got 3 good sons that have done well and been good students and good young men, and that's the #1 accomplishment that I'm proud of.
What else have you done?
Worked.
What kind of work?
Worked a lot. Well, when Marley and I met, like I said, we were undergraduates, and I found you can't do a whole lot with a political science degree. It's sometimes just a stepping stone to something else to get you ready for more. I'd always wanted to be an attorney. I always wanted to be a prosecutor ever since high school. So I was fortunate to get accepted into BYU Law School. We went back there for 3 years, and I graduated from BYU Law in 1995. And I always had, like I said, wanted to be a prosecutor, began to apply for prosecution jobs around the state, and the first offer I got was in St. George.
I've heard of St. George.
Yeah, it's a beautiful little town down south that I had not heard much about at the time. I was born and raised in southern Idaho, so I'm more of a northerner.
What town?
Jerome, Idaho.
Jerome.
Yeah, it's by the Twin Falls along the Snake River Canyon. So we decided to go ahead and take that job, and we came down here to St. George in '96. And the only people we knew were a couple of law school friends, a couple guys that had already come down here ahead of me, and started our new life here. And it's been wonderful. I've practiced law first as a prosecutor. I was with Washington County, and then with St. George City for about 7.5 years total. And then my wife said it's time to try to make a little more money. So I went into private practice, and my hair turned gray. Maybe made a little bit more money, but maybe a little bit more stressful on the other side of things. And I've done a variety of types of legal practice, represented clients on many different matters: family law, criminal law, business law, contract disputes, anything that's simple that one guy can handle. I've pretty much done it at least once, probably. So it's been a good experience, and I've helped a lot of people get through some tough legal problems over the years.
What is the most important thing about the legal profession?
A lot of people talk bad about attorneys, and that's because there's always a few bad apples, and sometimes they feel like attorneys abuse the power they have, I guess, to bring legal cases and things like that. And sometimes you have attorneys that take advantage of people financially. And despite those negatives, I think that's a very small part of the attorney population. I think overall, especially down here, the attorneys that I know are mostly people who, they want to make a living, but at the same time, they are dedicated to helping their clients solve and grow and build, or whatever it is their client needs them to do to help with. That's what the attorney does. And so basically we help people, and sometimes with some of the most complex problems that they may ever have in their life.
Well, I looked up the word professional once several years ago, and I got the idea that it meant in the service of your fellow man or something. And so that, doctors, lawyers, whatever, real estate agents, professionals, apparently should be in the service of their fellow man.
It's the way it's supposed to be. And we do have ethical standards that we have to go by. We have to represent our clients vigorously. And I think that's sometimes where attorneys maybe get a bad rap, is maybe they're too vigorous, or at least the party on the other side might not like the vigorous way you represent your clients. But I've found that most of the attorneys here locally, we get along well together. We may go into the courtroom and battle it out with words, but afterwards we can shake hands and get along with each other. So I think we have a good legal community, and you can find an attorney to help with most things. There's a few areas of law that we don't have a lot of specializing in here, but just about any legal problem you can find a good attorney in southern Utah, I believe.
Why are you running for the Senate?
I felt like we needed something new. We needed not an establishment politician. We needed, like I said, a public servant, someone who would go back to constitutional government, defend the proper role of government under the Constitution, which in my mind is limited government. I think we need less government, bring power back to the people, to the states, and just cut back the size of government. I think that's the number one reason we need some new blood in the U.S. Senate.
Maybe they ought to just shut it down for 3 months, every 3 months.
Well, I think some people were happy with that government shutdown, even if it was only over the weekend. A lot of people might not have even noticed that the government was shut down. Obviously, the national government has some important responsibilities. It should be defending our nation, should be dealing with foreign countries and making sure that we have peaceful relations and trade relations and diplomacy. Those are all very important things that we need to have. On the other hand, I think that the government can get too oppressive of the people. And so that's the biggest problem I have with the federal government, is that many of the government agents become a law unto themselves, and they don't respect the rights of the people. Most people just want to raise their families, make a living, be able to enjoy their lives without harming others, and yet you've got the government telling you how to do every single thing, whether it's how we raise our kids, how we run our business, how we spend our money, and so on down the line. The government wants to tell us what to do.
Boy, they could save a lot of money if they stopped doing that.
All those poor government workers would be out of a job, though, so maybe
well,
we
they
need
could
to
retire.
we could put them to work doing something productive, I would say. So I'm pretty passionate about that. Other issues I'm concerned about, I've been involved with illegal immigration over the years. We started the group, the Citizens Council on Illegal Immigration, over 10 years ago here in the St. George area because of all the problems that we've had with illegal aliens coming here to work. And I think that group's made a difference. We've had some good people carry on the work over the years. And our local governments became responsive to that. They decided that if you want to do business in this county or in the St. George City, that you need to comply with federal law and not hire illegal workers. And so that's an issue that I'm pretty passionate about. I think we need to protect our borders, protect our citizens. That's the proper role of the federal government, in my view.
So St. George is not a sanctuary city?
I don't think so. No, I think that while probably the leaders of the local community, the county, the city, would probably say that they want to welcome, they want everybody to feel welcome here, but they want everybody to comply with the law, as I'm sure that's what they'd say. If you want to come, please come, but do it legally.
Well, that doesn't sound unreasonable.
It seems to be common sense. I think we have two problems. One is that we have made it somewhat difficult for people to come to our nation legally. It sometimes is a complex, expensive process to either immigrate or to become a citizen. Maybe we need to find ways to be more welcoming, have a streamlined process, while at the same time make sure we vet people so that we're not bringing in criminals or diseases or terrorists, as the cases sometimes may be. But on the other side, for the last 20, 30 years, we pretty much had an open border. If you wanted to get here from across the border, you could find a way. And so we've got to be more strict and more responsible about our borders if we're going to claim to be a nation.
It's been a long time since I actually applied for a job somewhere, but the last job I applied for was in California. You've heard of that third world country to the west of Nevada.
It has nice beaches.
Yes, it does. And one of the things that came up was that I signed a document about E-Verify. Why doesn't that work?
Well, I think generally it does, but the problem you have is false documents. So the people who come illegally and want to work illegally, they can get false documents. They can get false Social Security cards, false identification. So they may be using someone else's Social Security number to get through the E-Verify system. And plus, not all employers are required to use E-Verify, and some employers just skirt the law and don't comply with the system properly. So there's ways for people to get around it. The problem with the false documents, and it's a very serious problem, is sometimes they are using even our children's numbers. I mean, an illegal alien can have a Social Security number that belongs to someone else, perhaps a child, and they could apply for loans, they could get tax refunds or owe tax obligations. There's a lot of complications that could come from using someone else's Social Security number. And then a child, upon reaching the age where they might be applying for some financial matter, suddenly learns they've got a credit history they didn't even know they had. It could be a nightmare. So that's a real concern that needs to be stopped. What
about the land situation?
It's another really important issue. I've been pretty involved with the local leadership and the push to try to bring the public lands back to state or local control. I think we have great county commissioners here in Washington County who've been fighting on that issue. I know our county attorney's office has been very involved in that lands issue. I think what that one comes down to is the founding fathers and our Constitution never intended the federal government to own 60, 70, 80% of a state. Back east, that was...
They don't own any of it.
Yeah, that was not the case. So the land owned by the federal government originally was very small for specific purposes. Forts, docks, post offices, government offices, very limited. But out here in the West, they've got large percentages of our land tied up and under very strict control. And it's not productive. Uses are highly regulated as far as the different multiple uses that we'd like to have. And it's even gotten to the point where they're abusing the people, as the situation we've had with the Bundys, where these federal agents targeted them and even wanted to kill them.
Well, one of them got killed, not the Bundys, but one of the group got
Yeah,
killed.
yeah, up in Oregon, Lavoy Finicum was shot by Oregon State troopers. And so the solution, I think, to this is for the land to be returned to the states, and that's what Utah's been trying to do, is say, hey, federal government, give us back this land that we had before we became a state, and let us manage the land. And we can do so responsibly, we can do so wisely, and it'll be much better for the people of our state. And I support that. I like to work on that process back in Congress.
What's your history with the Republican Party?
Been very active, along with all that, raising the family and working. I've been very involved with the Republican Party over the years. Right when I was in college, when my wife and I got married, we wanted to be county delegates and state delegates. We became familiar with the caucus system that Utah has here in our state. And so early on, when we were even in college, we made some little flyers and went around the neighborhood passing them out. Hey, we're Larry Marley, Meyers, we're running for delegate. We wanted to be a delegate for this candidate that we liked. We didn't get elected as state delegates the first time, but we did get elected as county delegates. And so we were excited to become part of that Republican nominating process.
Was that in Utah County?
That was up when we were students at BYU, yeah. So since I've been down here, I've been involved as a precinct officer, a chair of my local precinct. I've been involved as a county, a state delegate. I've worked in the party itself as a volunteer, a party officer, a party volunteer, helping out with different things. And I also had the honor of being elected to be a national delegate twice. For the election in 2016, I was elected as a national delegate to go back to Cleveland and represent our state back at the national convention, which was very exciting.
How did you manage that?
Well, that came about because it looks a lot different now, because we have this wonderful President Donald Trump that's doing a lot of great things as a Republican. But back then, when we were still trying to figure out who was going to be our nominee, Ted Cruz won the state of Utah. And I had been helping out as a volunteer with the Ted Cruz campaign. And so I was on the Ted Cruz slate that the candidates they put forward and said, hey, these are the people who have been volunteering and working with the Ted Cruz campaign. We want to send them back to Cleveland. And then later on, Donald Trump won the nominations, so we had to flip over and support him. So that's how that came about, was as a Ted Cruz supporter. And I'm glad to see Senator Cruz. Took him a while to kind of mend those fences, because when you're in a heated political battle, sometimes both sides get a little heated. But
they say things they don't think about him.
Yeah, they might regret later. But they've mended their fences, and I think Ted Cruz has been a strong ally of President Trump. They've worked together on a lot of issues. So I'm glad to see that. I think that's how I would be. If I was in the U.S. Senate, I may not agree with 100% of what the president wants, but I agree with a lot of it, and I would try to work together on those things I agree with.
Who's your opposition? Or haven't they announced yet?
That's a loaded question. If you've been following the mass media.
I know nothing about the media or politics or anything.
Nothing about
and if
it.
I did know, I'd deny it.
You wouldn't admit to it. Well, occasionally I've looked at the Deseret News and the New York Times, and they all seem to think that Mitt Romney's already been elected as the next senator from the state of Utah.
Well, he's a carpetbagger, isn't he?
Well,
He hasn't even lived here.
I wouldn't want to use that term about a fellow Republican, but you know, Orrin Hatch, we weren't sure if he was going to run again. When I decided to run, I thought maybe Orrin was going to run again, and I thought I don't mind challenging him because he's maybe done some good service over the years, but it's time to retire. So I thought that
Time
would
to call him home.
time to call him home. That would have been a good race. But once he announced, it's kind of a wide open field, and I guess if Mitt Romney decides to just declare himself as a citizen of Utah and run here in Utah, we'll give him a run for his money. I've talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people say no, he's not the one we want. So he doesn't get to just waltz right in and claim the nomination unopposed.
Is there a residency requirement for the state of Utah?
Well, you do have to be a resident at the time that you're elected.
But there's no time limit? You have to be here?
No time
Well,
limit.
some places there's a 5-year limit.
There may be limits for other races, but these federal races actually come down to the Constitution. The U.S. Constitution sets the requirements for United States Representative and United States Senate, and the only one as far as residency for the Senate is a resident of the state at the time that you're elected. So it's pretty broad. It
You have
worked
to
out.
be a citizen?
Well, it worked out well for, yeah, you do have to be, I think, it worked out well pretty good for Hillary Clinton, you'll remember.
Well, that's
you
right.
know.
She just moved to New York the day before the election.
She wasn't going to get elected in Arkansas, which was a very conservative state, and so she went to where there's a more friendly population. So maybe Mitt Romney's worn out his welcome in Massachusetts, and he's not going to get elected to the Senate there, so let's give Utah a try.
Well, I don't think he's going to announce.
We'll see. It's been kind of a game. Will he or won't he? I think there's some other good Republicans that will jump into the race one way or the other. I don't know any of them at this point, but I expect that there'll be competition, and we'll go around the state and present our case, and I feel like I could serve the voters well, and I think I'll have a lot of support.
Tell me a little bit more about your family, your sons.
They're, each one's different. As you know, children, each one has their own personalities. Our oldest son is very interested in science, and he's always wanted to be an astronaut or explore outer space. So he's been studying physics up at BYU. He recently switched over to geology, so I guess he's coming down to earth a little bit more in his major there. So he'd like to be some type of involved in the scientific fields, but he's still got to finish up his degree before he moves on to something like that. Our second son is a business major up at Utah State, and they have a good business program. And he's not sure exactly which direction to go with that, but he's a great salesman. He enjoys learning different aspects of the business field, and it wouldn't surprise me to see him as a CEO of a company someday. So he's got great potential. And our youngest, his personality is fun-loving and liking to have a good time with his friends. Has served him well on the mission. He's gotten along well with his companions.
Well, that's a miracle in itself.
He's worked hard. He's enjoyed the work and the people that they meet. He sends us humorous stories every week by email of the adventures that he's having. And he wants to study maybe pre-med or physical therapy or sports medicine, something like that, up at Southern Utah University when he gets back. So we'll have the whole state covered, South, Central, and North with these.
Well, that's rather disloyal, isn't it?
I don't know.
Didn't Dixie and SUU in the old days have a hatchet they used to throw at each other or something?
Probably have some kind of rivalry.
Yeah.
Well, our oldest, we've actually been loyal to Dixie State too. My wife was a student there for a couple years. She was working on a music degree, vocal performance, before she decided to become a writer. And now she's a published author. She's written a historical book, historical fiction, and she's working on her second book. So that should be out. Those are on Kindle, downloadable books. And then our oldest son, the one that's at BYU, he was a kicker on the football team here for Dixie State for 2 years. So he played and went to Dixie State for 2 years.
Is he playing up there?
No, you can't do physics and play football at the same time.
We've got 2.5 minutes left. What do you
All
think of Trump?
I was curious about Donald Trump when he ran for president. I didn't know him very well. I knew he was a celebrity and a wealthy businessman. I didn't know much about his background, and obviously there's some bad things in it. His history, not exactly an upstanding history as far as his personal life. But on the other hand, he seems to be a hardworking man. He's very patriotic. He loves our country. He wants to make it better. And he finally gave voice to what a lot of Americans believe as far as getting our country back to our traditional values and being America first. And I like that. And so the more I've learned about him and his political views and the policies he's pushing, the more I like. Less regulation, open up energy development, tax cuts, conservative judges. Those are all things I can get behind. And those that want to get rid of him, they've got their own agenda.
Well, there's a scripture. I guess we shouldn't be talking about scriptures, but it says something like, "There's not a man liveth and doeth good and sinneth not." So
Exactly.
we're all sinners.
Yeah, and I've got my skeletons buried very deep. As long as they don't talk to any of my high school friends, I should be.
I won't tell anybody. Oh, don't do it.
They'll stay there.
Well, we've got 1 minute and 20 seconds left. What's your final words?
Well, I invite people to learn more about me by going to my website, Meyers4Senate.com, MEYERS, for Senate, FOR, Senate.com. We've got a lot of information on there, biography, views on the issues. You can comment, send me questions. I'll respond to questions. And so it's a good place to start. And we are looking for volunteers, people to get involved. We encourage people to get involved in the Republican caucuses. We want good delegates this year. I'm just going through the caucus process. I'm not gathering signatures. So I need good supporters across the state to be part of the process.
Well, thank you very much for being with us.
It's a pleasure.
We always have fun. This is Lane Rano from the campus of Dixie State University. Thank you for being with us. We've been talking with Larry Meyer, candidate for Senate, United States Senate, here in the state of Utah. Thanks again for being with us.